This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get free access to Nebula, the streaming service built by all your favorite YouTubers, when you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below. Vice, ESPN, and the History Channel. What do these three media outlets have in common? Despite their different target audiences, they're all owned by the same company, Disney. What about these three? Same story. They're all owned by Comcast. If you were to pick a bunch of media operations from a hat, odds are the vast majority of them are owned and operated by one of just 5 megacorporations. Since the early 1980s, the number of media companies controlling the bulk of US media has shrunk from 50 to just 5. We've gone from a media landscape operated by a reasonable number of controlling interests to a reality dominated by near monopolies, just barely sneaking under the enforcement of antitrust laws. In this episode, we're going to talk about the consolidation of American media in the hands of a few ultra-powerful companies, and what that means in a time when the very wealthy have outsized influence over public policy. Before we begin, it's worth noting that corporate deals, acquisitions, and mergers happen all the time, often with little to no coverage. It's quite possible that by the time you watch this video, some of these data points will have changed. But unless something truly cataclysmic happens, the vast majority of US media will still be under the thumb of one or more of the 5 supercorporations we're about to discuss. So, without further ado, let's meet the Big 5. Comcast, Disney, National Amusements, News Corp, and AT&T, taking the spot from Time Warner, which it acquired in 2018 for $109 billion. You probably guessed that Disney was on the list, since they've had some seriously high-profile acquisitions in recent years, most notably Marvel and Lucasfilm. But I'd be surprised if you've ever heard of National Amusements or News Corp. These incredibly bland names and their lack of public-facing operations are intentional. Why draw attention to yourself as one of a tiny number of corporate behemoths when people only care about a select few of your properties? Whether you're watching CBS News, scrolling through GameSpot, or reading a book published by Simon & Schuster, you're padding the enormous wallet of National Amusements. And you'd never suspect that these 3 very different operations are run by the same company. The same goes for News Corp. They own National Geographic, Fox News, and HarperCollins. Altogether, the Big 5 are worth over $400 billion, controlling something like 90% of all US media, including news networks, Hollywood movie studios, and print publications, and they reach nearly 100% of all US households. And, fun fact, much of the remaining 10% is owned by only slightly less giant multi-billion-dollar corporations, like Sinclair, which, as you may remember, got itself into hot water by blasting out a propaganda broadcast over hundreds of local US news channels. One-sided news stories plaguing our country. So, how exactly are they allowed to do this? Surely having just 5 companies dominate the nation's media is considered monopolizing, right? Well, no, but just barely. Let's look at what it takes to be considered a monopoly. In order to be considered a pure monopoly, a single company has to have complete control over a market containing a good or service with no close substitutes. So, there you go. Since there are 5 large corporations that share the US media market, none of them qualify as a monopoly. But you don't have to be classified as a pure monopoly in order to wield monopolistic power. With such a massive concentration of wealth and power in the hands of so few, it all but ensures that smaller operations never have the chance to succeed. Unless you count the very American concept of success, which is building a company just large enough to get bought out by one of the big players. What we see in the US media landscape is more of an oligopoly, complete control spread across just a handful of powerful groups. There's so much interplay and deal-making within these 5 megacorporations that in effect, they are a monopoly in every sense but the legal one. For example, it's not uncommon to see one of the Big 5 hold a massive stake in a property owned by another of the Big 5. But if there were so many more media corporations as recently as the 1980s, how did we get to the dystopian, all-powerful corporate landscape we see today? To make a long story short, it all boils down to the passing of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. This piece of legislation was supposedly intended to deregulate the increasingly tangled broadcast and telecommunications markets, allowing anyone to enter and compete in the industry. Whatever the intended result was, the actual outcome was simply the rapid consolidation of power in the hands of fewer and fewer massive corporations. In the 2003 edition of Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, he notes, "The Telecommunications Act of 1996 enabled the handful of corporations dominating the airwaves to expand their power further. Mergers enabled tighter control of information." He was right, and it only got worse. The decade before the Telecommunications Act, 50 companies controlled the majority of the media landscape. By 1992, that number had fallen by 50%. And after the passage of the new TV and broadcast legislation, the number quickly shrank even further, to just 6 in the year 2000. And that's roughly where it stayed to this day. Not because these giant companies wouldn't love to own more of the market, but because they physically can't without triggering antitrust lawsuits. To put in perspective just how much of the market the Big Five control, let's have a look at some of the media operations they own. We'll start with News Corp. Rupert Murdoch's empire owns Fox, including all of its branches like Fox Sports and 20th Century Fox. It owns FX, GQ, The Wall Street Journal, Sky News, HarperCollins Publishing, The New York Post, National Geographic, Zondervan, MarketWatch, and countless others. National Amusements owns CBS and its branches. It owns Paramount, Nickelodeon, MTV, BET, GameSpot, VH1, Comedy Central, The Smithsonian Channel, Spike, Showtime, Simon & Schuster, Game FAQs, CNET, and Viacom, once a major player in the media world itself before being consumed. AT&T, the newest member of the Big Five after acquiring the massive Time Warner, controls CNN, HBO, Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers, DC, TBS, truTV, Cinemax, TNT, Adult Swim, part of Hulu, Turner Classic Movies, Time Magazine, Rocksteady Games, and Time Warner Cable, to name just a few. Comcast, which has a well-deserved reputation as a thoroughly evil corporation, owns NBC, MSNBC, USA Network, Sci-Fi, Fandango, Universal Pictures, Focus Features, Working Title Films, Rotten Tomatoes, Bravo, Oxygen, Big Idea, part of Hulu, MLB Network, NHL Network, and dozens of internet ventures. And finally, everyone's favorite family-friendly corporate overlord, Disney. Disney owns ABC, Pixar, DreamWorks, ESPN, Lifetime, The History Channel, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Hollywood Records, Touchstone Pictures, Vice, plus a giant swath of the comic book industry thanks to their acquisition of Marvel. And of course, these are only a small sample of the media operations owned by the Big Five. Odds are, if you can think of a network you watch, you'll find it's owned by one of them. The one main exception you may have noticed is Netflix. Netflix, while not outright owned by any of the Big Five, is owned in part by a number of large interests, some of them very shady, like the well-known BlackRock, the world's largest shadow bank. So really, no matter what your network preferences, you're only being offered the illusion of choice. In reality, almost everything we watch or read, whether on TV, online, in theaters, or on the pages of a book, newspaper, or magazine, is just a tentacle of the enormous kraken that is the corporate media landscape. No matter what perspectives these outlets offer, remember that they're all owned by the same ultra-wealthy business interests, and they have their own agenda. The Big Five own all the major news networks, and the messages they put out are designed to reinforce the status quo, peddling minor aesthetic disagreements and diverting attention away from serious societal problems. This is simply the natural conclusion of the hyper-capitalist system we have in the United States. Powerful companies will grow larger and larger, consuming smaller companies that can't compete, acquiring more and more properties until they've reached the very limit of what could be considered legal, thereby dodging antitrust laws and maintaining the maximum amount of power, profit, and cultural significance. And this is only one area of the American market. Every other aspect of American life is becoming similarly consolidated, from pharmaceuticals to energy to manufacturing. The threat of the monopolization of every area of modern life is real, and its consequences could be disastrous and far-reaching, except for those pulling the strings at the very top. If you've watched my last few videos, you'll have noticed that YouTube has been demonetizing a lot of them. That's why some of my creator friends and I teamed up to build Nebula, a streaming platform built by and for YouTubers like me, so we don't have to worry about demonetization. Since Nebula is all about creating thoughtful content, we've partnered with CuriosityStream, an established streaming platform with a solid track record of caring about great educational content and the financial security of those who produce it. CuriosityStream is an online streaming service with thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers in the game. You can find tons of great episodes like American Icon's Walt Disney, which is a great quick watch if you enjoyed this week's video. As educational creators ourselves, we love CuriosityStream, so we've worked out a deal where if you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below, you'll also get access to Nebula, 100% free. For a limited time, CuriosityStream is offering 26% off their annual plan. That's less than $15 a year for both CuriosityStream and Nebula, which, in my humble opinion, is a pretty great deal. Since we're all stuck inside anyway, why not spend some time watching fascinating documentaries on CuriosityStream, or check out Nebula's exclusive content, like Real Engineering's Logistics of World War II series. You can also watch all my videos as they were intended, ad-free. There really is something for everyone, and by signing up at the link below, you're helping us produce more content without the fear of demonetization. Give CuriosityStream a shot, and get free access to Nebula when you sign up using the link below. It really does help support my channel and educational creators all across YouTube. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, consider subscribing to stay up to date with my latest episodes. If you hated it, go ahead and drop a thumbs down. You can check out my previous episodes by clicking the links on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.